The huge amounts of the whirlpool opened, and the land bridge that had just been constructed went directly from the African continent to the Mexican state of the American continent. Martin walked in the center, with Optimus Prime on the left and Megatron on the right. Behind him was an 18-meter-high Hercules, and brought a huge army directly to this temporary base built by S.H.I.E.L.D. The moment he saw Martin and his army, the siren went off, and the sharp screams rang across the night sky. Level 1 alert. That war lunatic is here. An agent's face changed drastically. He pressed the alarm for the first time and looked at Martin tremblingly. Sir, may I ask if this is the temporary base of S.H.I.E.L.D.? I came here for a hammer. It belongs to me, but I accidentally fell here. Martin opened his eyes to talk nonsense, with a gentle smile on his face, but to those who knew what crime he had committed, this smile was clearly more terrifying than the devil. This guy destroyed thousands of military bases across the United States, resulting in the deaths of tens of thousands of soldiers. This guy detonated a nuclear bomb and killed thousands of American troops. The subsequent nuclear radiation enveloped half of the Americas, causing countless people to flee in a hurry. If you want to choose the person they hate most from the world, then there is no doubt that it must be Martin. This man has killed too many people. This gentleman? Do you want to die? Martin looked at the startled guy in front of him and smiled. Megatron laughed grinningly, and directly showed a hand cannon. The huge amounts of the cannon was aimed at the agent's poor head. After the cannon, he was gone. In the distance, Ms. Jian looked at the many big steel guys with a look of fear, and whispered, "It seems that you are out of play. There is a terrible guy staring here. No one dares to oppose him. He died miserably. His ability is a god on this planet." Thor in the distance looked serious, his eyes bursting with anger. "Liar. That is obviously my hammer, and this mortal dare to call himself a god? When I get back the hammer, only his group of robots, it's all beaten into scrap." Martin. At this time, a low voice suddenly sounded in the PA equipment. "You have the ability to activate the machinery. It is impossible not to know the situation here. Since it is here, there is no need to deliberately embarrass my employees. You are? Phil Coulson, S.H.I.E.L.D. high-level agent, is also the top person in charge of this temporary base. Very well, finally someone can speak. I will get back what belongs to me." Martin smiled, raised his foot and walked in, reaching out his hand. Megatron had already bombarded the front door and broke the closed door in front. A group of shape-shifting kings rushed in and crushed it along the way. There are countless buildings. Phil Coulson was already standing beside Thor's hammer with a serious face, waiting for them quietly. With a smile on his face, Martin strode up, forcibly grasped Phil Coulson's hand, and shook it in an exaggerated manner, as if to meet an old friend whom he hadn't seen for many years. Meeting for the first time, "Phil Coulson, agent, this hammer is my artifact. I will take it now." "Mr. Martin, as far as I know, this hammer is not yours. It suddenly appeared in the state of Mexico. Please tell me, why are you throwing your things to America, half of the earth?" Phil Coulson's eyes were full of seriousness. Even if he was surrounded by a large group of war weapons, he still showed no fear. "Because I conducted a teleportation experiment. I used this thing as an experimental product. As you have seen, I succeeded. I can lead my army to appear anywhere on the earth anytime, anywhere." Martin laughed and said, "I was provoked by me, Phil Coulson. I was very popular with a bunch of idiots on your side. If necessary, I really don't mind destroying all the countries that are hostile to me on this continent. Drag the group of idiots from a high position, and chop off their heads one by one under the crowd." Phil Coulson fell silent. He knew that every word the man said was serious, and that he did it. The deaths and injuries of tens of thousands of soldiers and the detonated nuclear bombs were nothing but warnings. Phil Coulson took a deep breath, stepped away from his body, and made a please gesture. "We tried all means, but we couldn't move the hammer. This is a serious violation of the basic laws of physics. You claim this is yours. You must be able to pick it up." "A wise choice, Phil Coulson. We will become friends. I and the horror king of Eastern Europe and Latvia are not the same people. As long as you don't mess with me, I have no interest in being an enemy of the whole world." Martin is going to pull the hammer. "Stop, humble mortal. Don't tarnish this god's weapon with your despicable behavior." A loud roar suddenly came, and a big blonde roar rushed in, angrily. "This is my Thor's hammer, and only I can lift it in the entire Midgard. Only you can lift it up." Martin released the palm of his hand that had just grabbed the hammer, with a look of surprise. "My lord, how do you prove that you can lift it?" Thor's eyes burst with intense luster, and he raised his head as if he wanted to remember Martin's appearance in his heart. then looked at the hammer on the ground, and gradually showed a presumptuous laugh. He knows too well about this hammer named Mjolnir, and he has fought with this hammer for thousands of years. You will pay a painful price for your arrogance, stupid mortal. Thor smiled arrogantly and strode forward, grabbing the handle of the hammer with his stout arm. In an instant, countless dark clouds gathered in the sky, and terrible thunder suddenly broke out, smashing into the ground one by one. Phil Coulson and the others immediately changed their faces and looked at this scene with shock. There are a lot of electrons converging abnormally, and there are many forces that cannot be scanned. Optimus Prime analyzed it again and quickly said. The pouring rain crashed down, and Thor was bathed in thunder and lightning, smiling wildly, as if grasping the 9 realms, and immediately, he yanked hard. The hammer did not move. The wind stopped, the rain was gone, the thunder and lightning dissipated, and the great Thor was lost. No, father. What the hell is this? Thor was very unwilling, and snarled again, exhausting all his strength, but it was still useless. Thor collapsed to the ground in despair. He believed that as long as he lifted the hammer, he would be able to regain his divine power, but now he doesn't even have the qualifications to lift the hammer. He will always be immortal ever since, and he will never be Thor again. Wonderful magic show, Thor, your weather-changing trick is really awesome, I can't do that. Megatron chuckled maliciously, with a deep sarcasm. Thor looked dull and did not respond. Martin shook his head, took a step forward, and said, "It's me." After speaking, he grabbed it and pulled it, the hammer still didn't move. Phil Coulson was suddenly relieved and smiled. "Mr. Martin, it seems this is not your hammer." "No, I will let you see, this is my hammer." Martin slapped his chest, and saw that the disc device attached to his chest suddenly began to undergo complex changes. Soon, a powerful armor that enveloped Martin all appeared, with complicated patterns engraved on it. All kinds of powerful coercion broke out. Supreme God Armor. The inadvertent fluctuations on the armor directly forced the people around them to tremble, and they couldn't help backing back again and again, revealing a shocked look. At this moment, the powerful beings on the entire Earth raised their heads at the same time. The terrible feeling of depression and suffocation produced by the Supreme God Armor easily enveloped the entire Earth. I heard that whoever can lift this hammer can become the king of Asgard. I don't know if Odin's words count. Martin is awe-inspiring, with strong fluctuations in his body. Stepping out, the ground suddenly sags automatically. It is not because the weight is too heavy, but it is more like because the armor and its owner are too high in specifications. It is such a humble dirt as not worthy of tarnishing each other. This is a scene similar to the rule of the universe, where the ground is automatically sunken. Thor is closest to Martin, and in this crisis that seems to be extinct all the time, he is shocked. "Who are you? Are you the Supreme Magician?" In his cognition, only the Supreme Magician is the only great existence on Earth. "No, I'm not the Supreme Magician, and I don't know that one, I'm just a human being interested in becoming the new king of Asgard." Martin turned his head and looked through the battle helmet. After taking a deep look at Thor, his mighty power erupted, and his will began to spur the most defensive horror armor in this shape-shifting multi-universe. The power of his unrestrictedly amplified and superimposed crazy. The whole Earth faintly began to tremble, especially under Martin's feet. Terrible cracks began to erupt on the ground, extending to more distant areas, as if to tear the whole Earth apart. Martin looked savage, and the terrifying force burst. He shook this Mjolnir violently, and then pulled it up. Boom. The huge amounts of thunder smashed down, and the powerful Thor's power burst from Mjolnir, which caused countless thunder and lightning to descend. Obviously, Martin has already exceeded the upper limit of Thor's hammer by wearing the supreme armor, and he has not been approved by Thor's hammer at all. He just relied on an ultra-high specification to rudely mention Mjolnir. Simply unreasonable strength. In the thunder and lightning, Martin raised Mjolnir high and pointed directly at the sky. Numerous thunder and lightning surrounded him. He was forcibly driven by him. Paired with his majestic and terrifying supreme armor, Martin at this moment is more than Thor, is more like a Thor. Thor was completely stupid. He was paralyzed on the ground. He had just suffered a traumatic psychic blow. At this moment, seeing Martin driving his hammer, his heart was breaking, and his strong will seemed to be collapsing at this moment. "Why?" Thor murmured. His pupils were full of the terrifying figure holding up Mjolnir in front of him. God King Odin said, "Whoever can lift the hammer can have the power of Thor." Martin felt this, and he was constantly gaining divine power from this Thor hammer. This is supernatural power. Martin thoughtfully, and through the powerful analysis ability of the Supreme God Armor, he analyzed the essence of the divine power little by little. This was the first time he had come into contact with something like divine power, and now that he took a closer look, it was nothing more. When I become the existence of level Godfather or even level single universe, and can suppress countless civilizations in the galaxy with my own body, the energy fluctuations when I use the fire source are also divine power. Martin analyzed for a while. His mind was filled with a lot of knowledge. The more he analyzed, the less he was interested in the so-called divine power. That's all, it is only the limit of level Godfather. Thor, I raised Mjolnir, I am more qualified to be Thor than you. Martin looked at Thor from a high ground, and said in a deep voice. Thor looked bitter. Yes, you have enough qualifications to be Thor, but you lifted it by brute force, not the hammer's approval. Boom. Martin threw the hammer to the ground, turned around and ordered Optimus Prime, raise it. Optimus Prime was silent for a moment, moving huge amounts of body shape, stretched out 2 fingers to gently pinch the hammer, and then exerted a little force. In an instant, thunder and lightning. Mjolnir did not set up any obstacles, and was picked up by Optimus Prime. The powerful divine power filled Optimus Prime's mechanical body, bringing him even more powerful and completely unfamiliar power. Thor was completely silly, staring at the blue robot blankly. Mr. Martin, are there really gods in this world? I mean, Norse mythology, and other myths, are they true?
Phil Coulson quickly recovered from the shock. After careful analysis, he took a deep breath and asked in a low voice.
His wisdom is not low, combined with the scene before him, everything is obvious, even if the answer is so absurd. Martin pointed to the sky and said lightly, are those myths true? You will see right away. A living god is coming to Earth. Everyone was shocked and suddenly raised their heads to look at the sky, and even Thor showed a glimmer of hope in the confusion. A terrifying whirlpool appeared, covering a small half of the Earth in an instant, and the entire American continent was covered by this terrible whirlpool. A terrifying shadow appeared faintly during the extremely fast tumbling. The whole Earth is in chaos, and the leaders of the big forces everywhere are in a state of desperation, issuing orders one after another, but many of them can't even find out what happened. Aliens are going to invade? Someone looked at him absurdly. That's right, Odin is really an alien, Kamar Tosh. Mordu fell into rage in an instant, and was about to inform the holy places to prepare for battle, but Ancient One stopped him directly. Watch it quietly, as long as he doesn't attack the Earth, we don't need to be so nervous. Ancient One walked out of the portal, holding a glass of iced drink in his hand, and plugged in a straw to take a sip. Martin looked up at the sky, watching Odin finally figured out, and suddenly smiled. Mortals, Mjolnir is Asgard's artifact. Odin huge amounts of phantoms stood tall, holding the gun of eternity, and talking to Martin across countless stars. On his majestic face, there was a subtle irritability. Originally, he should fall into a deep sleep at this time. The power of Odin is too heavy on his aging body. If he does not fall asleep, it will only shorten his few lifespan. But who would have thought that this kind of thing would happen on Earth?
First, a mortal forcibly picked up the hammer, and that's all, it can be done entirely by external forces. But then another robot lifted Thor's hammer effortlessly, and Odin couldn't sit still now.
Optimus Prime really obtained Thor's hammer approval instantly by his own will. If Optimus Prime didn't get the approval, then no one else would be able to do it. This completely exceeded Odin's expectation. He didn't expect that there really were such mortals on the Earth, and he just ran to Thor's hammer and raised the hammer. Father, Thor's face showed surprise and guilt. But Odin stared at Martin from start to finish, completely ignoring his children. Martin looked up. When everyone was overwhelmed by Odin's terrible coercion, he looked at Odin calmly and said calmly, you threw Thor's hammer on the Earth. A harsh spell was set, and now my subordinates and I have done it. What are you going to do? Odin was silent for a while and said coldly, only the Asgard can inherit the throne. Moreover, I have to reclaim Mjolnir and find a new owner for this hammer.
Martin laughed suddenly. Sure enough, this kind of shameless old gangster is more like Odin, because Odin was like this when he was young, fanning the flames, leading Hela to war with other gods, war with other 8 realms, and the world tree together with the entire galaxy. The war was fought.
When he is old, he can't move, and then he has put on the dignity of the God King, and he is restrained. His Majesty the King, in this case, I don't need this hammer. Please take it back by picking up rubbish. Martin picked up Thor's hammer, in front of Odin's face, with a little bit of force, along with subtle divine thunders emerging from the hammer. Terrible cracks appeared on the surface of the hammer. Thor hammered in Martin's hands and wailed, "What are you doing? Stop!" Thor, who knows Thor's hammer best, his eyes turned red in an instant, and he was about to pounce on Martin with a roar. Snapped. Megatron raised his hand and slapped Thor a dozen meters away. In full view, Martin smashed Mjolnir with a bang. A terrible thunder gushing out of the hammer, accompanied by a smashing divine power, blasted everything out in all directions, causing huge amounts of turbulence. But Martin stood still, motionless, as if being blown by the breeze. This overbearing scene made everyone stunned. Even Odin, who was on the throne of Asgard and talked with Martin by means of supernatural power, had a momentary pause at this moment. In that single eye, there was a faint horror. Chi breathes. This mortal actually crushed Mjolnir in front of him. This is a serious provocation to Asgard. Mortal, your courage is worthy of commendation, and you have successfully angered me. It has been too long, too long. No one dares to challenge my dignity face to face. God King Odin slowly stood up from the throne, and the terrifying divine power fluctuations slowly spread, and the Asgard continent in the round sky began to tremble. All the people were shocked. I don't know why His Majesty was so angry. Ancient One, this mortal took the initiative to provoke me, the dignity of a supreme king. This matter only exists between me and him, there must be a result. Odin's face was taut, and his wrinkled face was full of murderous intent. The pressure that had run across the 9 realms for millions of years suddenly broke out at this moment. Ancient One did not give him any response. Odin snorted coldly, showing satisfaction. Silence is the best answer. Holding Asgard's strongest attacking artifact, the Eternal Spear, he rushed directly to the earth. It seems that since 1,000 years ago, the top Protoss of their world tree were beaten up by the cosmic gods who suddenly descended on the earth, and too many cats and dogs have forgotten his horror. Asgard, Olympus, Heavenly Court, it is the Universe Celestial Group that can defeat these 3 Protoss head-on, not some ignorant idiot. It's time to reminisce about the time when everything was in his shadow.
Odin sneered at the corner of his mouth. You know, 1,000 years ago, the time point was very special. The cosmic gods suddenly came to the earth and checked their biological experiment works human beings. It turned out that the development process of human beings was actually interfered by the gods, and the entire human race was in existence under the shadow of the gods.
Then there was that tragic battle. Led by the 3 major Protoss, united with dozens of Protoss with a smaller file size, such as the Mayan ancestry and the island ancestry, and gathered dozens of the file-size god kings to fight the 4th team of the universe god group that has descended on the earth. At that time, they were so energetic. Although they had heard of the prestige of the universe gods group, they didn't take it to heart. They firmly believed that the unprecedented gathering of gods was enough to destroy all powerful enemies. Even if the enemy is Megatron in the entire universe, countless ancient existences are like the cosmic gods who avoid snakes and scorpions. As a result, I woke up from the dream. The gods of the world tree tried their best and were still hung up and beaten by the cosmic gods. And it was only the 4th team that thrashed them. There are still many teams of this kind of strength in the Universe Celestial Group.
The leading god was even more terrifying. He defeated and killed many god kings, and a large number of gods were directly wiped out. What he said impressed all the gods.
You are just ordinary beings with so-called divine powers. They are the 3rd generation gods that accidentally reproduced under the world tree. Let the 4 chaos gods come. Only their 2nd generation gods can follow the universe gods. Group dialogue on an equal footing. You weak gods of the 3 generations are not worthy. To this day, Odin can't forget the indifference and ignorance of the other party. The gods have withdrawn from the earth and promised not to interfere with the civilization process of the earth's people, but this does not mean that the gods are weak, nor does it mean that mortals can insult the most powerful god king today. Odin's eyes were filled with anger. The tragic failure thousands of years ago was a shadow that Odin could not erase. He had a bright moment. When the battle was about to collapse, he stood up, wearing Asgard's strongest creation destroyer armor, holding the strongest attack artifact Eternal Spear, and bursting out all the power of Odin. Briefly, the celestial group that blocked a whole team greatly shocked the opponent. Although this peak battle cost him half his life and paid a painful price, it was worth it. This preserved the system of the world tree and brought about the peace of the last millennium. But now it seems that the mortal people on the earth have clearly forgotten the terrible gods. how they were enslaved and raised by the gods in the days thousands of years ago. Odin stepped into Bifrost and quickly descended into the outer space of the earth. Wearing a king's costume, Odin burst into a terrible cold light in his single eye. At this time, a satellite moved over and transmitted the image of Odin standing in a vacuum to the earth. Everyone was suffocated, staring blankly at this role that seemed to be an ancient costume in a film and television drama, and there was a sense of time traveling in a trance, such as falling into an ice cave and numb scalp. This person is the god in the myth. Numerous high-level hairs stand suddenly, even if they are separated by tens of thousands of kilometers, there is still a humble feeling of being overlooked and ignored by the gods. In the helicarrier, Fury looked at him with a blue face, fell into a long silence, and then said dryly, "It turns out that those myths are true. There really is Thor in this world, and there really is Odin." God King Odin arrived on Earth. On the Earth, Thor was sitting in the mud, spouting a mouthful of blood, without majesty. At the moment, he looked up at the sky and suddenly burst out laughing. Successive joys and compassions severely destroyed his will. "Mortal, you angered the Father of God, you will regret it. The whole Midgard will suffer because of your stupidity." Thor screamed with disheveled hair and red eyes. "Shut up, useless things." Megatron grinned, another fist hit Thor's head severely, and this time he fainted directly, making the attack extremely cruel. Martin commanded, "When I expel Odin, I will consider how to deal with this guy, but it can be tortured, but cannot be killed." This really touched Odin's back scales. An old guy who is dying without his son will definitely go crazy. If it is dropped, maybe I will go back to modify the timeline or something, which will be very troublesome. This is not surprising, because Odin has the ability to modify the timeline. In a certain comic, he even modified the timeline of the entire galaxy. Draw more blood from Thor and store it in our biological laboratory. In the future, when the scientists like Sasser and the ambulance arrive, they will be directly handed over to them for research. Martin gave a command, got up, and terrible power poured out from his body one after another. He raised his head, his gaze crossed the outer space of the Earth, and landed directly on Odin, the king of the overwhelming solar system. Although old, it is even more terrifying. Boom. Martin got up suddenly and rose rapidly like a comet. From bottom to top, he drew a terrible flame, which instantly descended into the Earth's atmosphere, all the way up, and stepped into the vacuum of the universe. The two godlike figures confronted each other, so that people on the Earth did not even dare to breathe. There should be strong people on our planet. Is it possible that we have to rely on this executioner to protect us?
Fury's already dark complexion is as black as the bottom of a pot at this moment. He is holding a mobile phone in one hand, and his face is full of mistrust and suspiciousness.
On the side, an Asian man always had a flat smile on his face. At this time, he said, "Isn't this great? At least a guy like him, he still considers himself to be an earthly person, and he thinks he is semi-human. Zheng Xian, I can feel his inner ambition. He can kill tens of thousands of soldiers to warn us that he will dare to cause a global disaster tomorrow. I don't trust him." Fury looked at each other and said in a low voice. Zheng Xian, the director of the Spear Bureau, touched his chin at the moment, but did not say anything after all. In the face of Fury, who has such a strong desire to control, he really couldn't say anything. Countless people are paying attention, watching this human being flying from the Earth and daring to face Odin. Odin held the gun of eternity and looked at Martin indifferently with a look of surprise in his eyes. At the same time, he said in a cold voice, "Human, you are very courageous. I can forgive you for other offensive actions, but only, you should not destroy Mjolnir. This is a symbol of the gods of Asgard." Martin smiled, but this cold and cruel smile was concealed by the battle helmet. "Your Majesty King, you have turned your back. Whoever can lift the Thor hammer can have it. This is what you engraved on the hammer's spell, but denies it. Then I'm not allowed to turn my face once? This is fair." "Fair?" Odin laughed in a low voice. "It has been too long for too long. No one dared to talk to him about such ridiculous things as fairness. Whoever dared to talk to him like this, the ashes would probably float out of the galaxy." "Mortal, let me tell you what fairness is," Odin said in a low voice. Terrifying divine power rolled over, and the roar whistle shook many planets in the solar system, causing huge amounts of waves, but Martin was in the middle of this vortex, motionless. The supreme divine armor is too strong, the defense is the first, and some of the escaped divine power is really not worth his shock. But the other beings affected were angered. A shocking sound wave suddenly burst out from the moon and rushed straight towards the two of them. "If you want to fight, Get out and fight. The vacuum outside the solar system is your battlefield. The Black Bat King stood on the surface of the moon staring at them with a gloomy face. His face was ugly. He said this sentence, issued a warning, and sprayed a terrible sound wave directly from his mouth. This is his ability. As long as he speaks, the sonic power that instantly wipes out a city is ejected from his mouth, so he doesn't even speak at all. Now he was forced to rush, the whole moon was trembling violently, and the people under his command were greatly affected. There is actually a level godfather here? Odin looked moved and took a deep look at the Black Bat King. Although the guy in front of him barely crossed the threshold of level godfather, at this level, he was already qualified to talk to him on an equal footing. Humans, let's go outside and fight. I am the Asgardian of the 9 realms. I will not destroy the entire Midgard just by killing you. Odin said in a deep voice, as the terrifying power burst out, he had to drag Martin to move. But Martin shook his body, and directly shook the restraint away, chuckled in a low voice, his body moved quickly, and he moved away from the solar system for an instant, confronting Odin. Then let's get started. Your Majesty the King of God, I would like to remind you in advance that if I accidentally beat you to death, I will go to Asgard immediately and kill everyone in order to avoid future troubles, so, don't die. Arrogant, even if you can stand here with this weird suit of armor, it doesn't mean you can defeat me, the Father of God. Odin snorted coldly and looked at it with one eye, killing intent surging. He has the eternal spear, and his attack power is super strong. He absolutely does not believe that there will be any armor on the earth that can withstand his shot. Boom. The confrontation between the two forces was fierce, and the eyes of the two sides looking at each other revealed a terrible murderous intent. Here we go. Ancient One stood in Kamar Taj, looking at it with his hands behind his back, as if the interest in watching was very strong. Terrible fluctuations occurred suddenly, across the long cosmic vacuum in a flash, and fluctuated to the solar system in a flash. Two existences like cosmic gods, fighting with all their strength at this moment, the terrifying power erupted as enough to crush a planet. This is just the beginning of the war. Wow. Odin pierced the eternal spear fiercely forward, and the adjacent large space was distorted on the spot, and there was a faint collapse. This terrible shot, coupled with Odin's terrifying power, was enough to blast everything ahead. No life body can resist his shot. Even the cosmic gods of the past, he could shake it head on, not to mention this earthling who got a weird armor from nowhere. This is the self-confidence from the King of God. Sen Leng appeared in Odin's one-eyed eye, and almost saw Martin, together with the armor he was wearing, were destroyed by the eternal spear, and there was not even a single cell left. But there was a loud noise. Martin firmly grasped the eternal gun with both hands, and the terrifying power erupted from the armor. Although it was technology, it was enough to match the supernatural god like Odin in terms of specifications and levels. The gun of eternity is firmly grasped by Martin. Time seemed to stop, and Odin's eyes were full of shock. What kind of armor are you? Definitely is the strongest armor. Your Majesty God King, it seems that your eternal spear is not as powerful as you think. Martin put aside the eternal spear with one hand, and the terrifying kinetic energy attached to the battle armor actually shook off Odin at the level of strength, and the moment a fist struck it, a terrible crack in the space faintly breathes. Odin's face changed, and he let out a low growl, his supernatural power agitated, but he was smashed through with this punch, and Odin himself was smashed out. As soon as the confrontation happened, Odin didn't seem to have the advantage. Some cosmic powers who are observing this battle from a distance are shaking in their hearts at this moment, and they silently remember Martin in their hearts, and they can hardly shake Odin's terrifying existence, no matter how much attention it takes. Odin, it seems that your plan to kill me is impossible to achieve. Martin sneered in a low voice. The bonus that the Supreme God armor brings to him is really terrifying. The terrible war system that comes with the armor can analyze all kinds of combat modes in an instant, and continuously bring all kinds of improvements to Martin. I really want to choose a set of battle armor in the comic system to be comparable to the Supreme God armor. It may only be the Hell armor built by all the members of the Justice League. The complex upgrades it brings can barely compare with the Supreme God armor. It's just barely. The Supreme God armor does not have any negative effects, and it will not need to extract the vitality of the driver like the Hell armor. Even if the vitality is really extracted, Martin does not arrange it. The fire source integrated in his body has infinite vitality and spiritual power. At this moment, Martin, the God King Odin, who has overwhelmed his fame for millions of years on the vacuum battlefield, is even more like a God than Odin. God from the earth. Boom boom boom. After several collisions, Martin faintly suppressed Odin. Although he was weak in attack and lacked the means of attack that could cause severe damage to Odin, in terms of defense, the terrifying characteristics of the Supreme God armor made Odin have no temper at all. There was another terrible roar, and Odin stabs Martin in the chest with a sharp shot, showing deep helplessness on his face. This powerful attack was again ineffective. This set of battle armor that has never been heard of is really unreasonable. It makes him feel a sense of powerlessness. No matter how you fight it, it can't cause any damage to Martin, even increasing the surging of divine power. He wanted to shake Martin to death through the shock, but he had no choice but to find. This battle armor actually has a magical shock absorption system, and the shock absorption amplitude is ridiculous, which is a violation of the rules of the universe. The more you fight, the more intense the battle between the two sides, but it just seems to be constantly roaring, and the stars can be shattered with a random blow, which greatly shocked those great beings that were seen from afar, but only the two sides at war knew that. Going on, even if it is too old, it will be impossible to tell the victory or defeat. What is the driving energy of your battle armor? After fighting for a few more hours, maybe even longer, God King Odin showed exhaustion on his face. He used Odin's power too frequently and overloaded, and burdened his old body too much. He axed immediately. I am the biggest driving force. If I am immortal, this suit of armor will never be exhausted. Even if the universe is destroyed, my armor will be eternal and immortal. Martin's calm voice came from behind the helmet, without any fatigue at all. He definitely won't get tired. Odin, it's time for me to take the initiative. Be careful not to be killed by me. Martin slowly said, and at the same time, took out another artifact, the leadership module. Leadership module. One of the top 10 artifacts, a symbol of supreme power, superfire. Although Martin did not draw the complete leadership module, he only got the 10-minute lottery permission, but at this moment, he took out this artifact and blessed it on the supreme god armor, and the combat power blessing it brought. Enough. 3 minutes. Martin calmly felt the terrifying power in his body, and his indifferent voice came through the helmet. I only need 3 minutes to cripple you. Odin laughed furiously, and let out a low roar. In an instant, from the Asgard continent, a black armor flew out. It was the Destroyer's armor. Back then, he was wearing the Destroyer's armor, to force a whole team of cosmic gods to attack. I recognize your strength only because of the toughness and special nature of your suit, but you have to defeat me in 3 minutes. It's ridiculous, arrogant human. Odin put on the Destroyer's armor, his own strength once again ushered in a skyrocket, and at this moment, he was fighting for the price of damage to his body again, and forcibly released Odin's power to a large extent, making his combat power directly come to a peak period. This is a terrifying force that shakes the entire Milky Way and the surrounding galaxies together. Martin moved. Suddenly surpassed time and space, appeared in front of Odin, and hit Odin's chest with a fierce punch, causing a clear depression in the opponent's powerful armor. This terrible punch, even this powerful the battlesuit can't stop them all. The confrontation between the two, in an instant, within several galaxies, a large number of fragile planets were affected, and they exploded and turned into the dust of the universe. The confrontation between the two gods came to the most intense point at this moment. With a single blow, annihilate a large number of fixed stars. Roar. The solar system, which was also severely affected, immediately saw a red cloak flying out from the earth. This red floating cloak expanded wildly, so large that it directly encased the entire solar system, and Ancient One's own powerful magic also covered the cloak. The surface shelters the fragile solar system and the earth. Let the two gods who spell out real fire go to war with the universe as the battlefield. Boom. Another series of fixed star collapsed, bursting out the last bright light. This terrible confrontation directly shocked many powerful civilizations, and even the 3 major interstellar empires were frightened. Who is it? Did the Black Bat King come to attack the Carry Empire? God King Odin is at war with a guy who has no record of any information. The old immortal, how long has it been gone, and then I can't help but start a war with other level Godfather powerhouses. Which world is he attacking this time? The Kree people were very angry. Many of the galaxies they ruled were affected. Many fixed stars directly exploded. As a result, they directly lost hundreds of millions of people. Their total population was only 30 billion. The Screw Empire and Shia Empire also fell into huge amounts of turbulence. And all these tragic losses are nothing more than 2 powerful men fighting unscrupulously. Another terrible light burst out. The battle armor worn by the King Odin was broken, and even the golden helmet that clung to his head was shattered, his head was scattered, blood was overflowing from the corner of his mouth, and an angry roar was heard in his mouth. He sounded, wielding the eternal spear one after another, but this time, his attack was easily blocked by Martin, who had been blessed with the leadership module and was too tough. There are 2 great artifacts in hand. Even if you count it as one of the top 10 artifacts, the specifications are no less than the fire source of the artifact. The terrifying specifications with unlimited vitality and infinite spiritual power have already made Martin at the moment surpass Odin too. Many. Even if his own life essence is not that powerful, he can't perfectly display the true power of these 3 terrifying weapons. But this is enough to deal with the mere level god Father Odin. It's been 2 minutes, Odin. An ear-piercing roar came out, oscillating about 1% of the universe. Martin pulled on the destroyer's armor, and the fire source in his body broke out again with an activating force, finally breaking through the divine power of the destroyer's armor. Protection began to compete for control of this powerful armor in all directions. Odin's eyes showed unprecedented shock and horror. He personally felt that in the destroyer's armor, there was a repulsive force. This piece of the strongest armor he had worn for 1,000,000 years was actually repelling him. How can this be? Who are you? Why do you master this kind of power that shouldn't be on you at all? Odin was frightened, and the suffocation of defeat came. He snarled and tried to expand Odin's divine power again, but suddenly a mouthful of blood came out, and the internal organs began to be crushed a little by this amazingly large divine power. His body is too old, it has reached its limit, so that his vision is starting to blur. Martin's stalwart figure, under his blurred vision, became unprecedentedly tall. What made him most concerned was not the strength and armor level, but the deep jealousy developed in my heart. You lost, Odin. Martin stepped out, and with a terrible buzzing sound, the destroyer's armor was completely torn from Odin's body. Odin lost. The loss was very miserable, and he had done his best, used the eternal spear, wore the destroyer's armor, and exploded out all the power of Odin at the cost of his body collapse. But still lost. The king, who was ambitious and hardworking, eventually lost to the open hangar. Boom. Martin tore the destroyer's armor from Odin, but didn't hold it in his hand. Instead, after confirming that the armor was completely controlled by his own source of fire, he immediately threw it to a far place and let it go. It wanders in the vacuum of the universe. At the same time, it was even more cruel and blasted with a punch. The terrible power at the moment completely broke out, sending Odin with a blow. Even if the opponent used all the magical protection, at the moment also spurted blood, in an instant, he was blasted thousands of light years away. Your Majesty the King of God, your fig leaf has been torn off again, what else can you say? Martin flashed and appeared in front of Odin. By this time, it happened to be 3 minutes, Martin directly blocked the leadership module, and carefully saved the remaining 7 minutes, waiting for the future when encountering an unstoppable terrible enemy before using it. At that time, there really needs to be someone who can force him to use the last 7 minutes of authority. I am afraid it is a stronger level single universe, or even a single person, at the same level as the entire multi-universe, diverse level universe gods. Martin was generally satisfied with this battle with Odin. He tested the Supreme God armor and the leadership module, which was tantamount to personally experiencing the possibilities and consequences of increasing the use of fire sources. If I have the Star Sword, I don't have to be so troublesome at all, and I have to rely on the leadership module to bless it and smash it with my fists. Weak. Martin shook his head in his heart and sighed with emotion. The eternal spear that Odin was holding was Asgard's strongest assault weapon ever, but this spear was only a weapon of level Godfather after all. If he had the invincible Star Sword, he could chop Odin to death in a minute at most. The name of the strongest attack weapon, the Star Sword, in the shape-shifting King Kong multi-universe of the previous life, it is also the supreme attack side artifact that resounds through countless parallel universes. What kind of shit eternal gun? Pick up the Star Sword and slash it. This shit spear was slashed on the spot. Martin is standing in the starry sky and is about to step over, but at the moment, Odin has the terrible power of Odin surging, and there is also a very cruel and violent hostility. Obviously, if Martin dares to lean over, he will immediately pull Martin to death. You won, Earthling. In addition to his ferocity, Odin's face was lonely, and even more deeply at a loss. He lost, and he still lost so badly. Even if it was 1,000 years ago, when he was alone and forcefully smashed the entire fourth team of the Celestial Group, he did not lose as badly as he is now. This was only a short period of 1,000 years. The racial characteristics of the Asgard people, even his god king, could not escape. As we all know, the ordinary people of the Asgard Protoss have 3 times the physical fitness of the people on Earth, which is equivalent to the weakened version of Captain America because the normal power of Captain America is 1 ton. As for the Asgard people with divine power, their combat power and life level will usher in an explosive increase, such as Thor, who is in charge of Thor's power, Hela who is in charge of death, and so on. What is more noteworthy is the peak of Asgard's combat power. The period can be maintained for a long time, but once it enters the twilight years of life, the body will age at an exaggerated rate until it is completely dead. God King Odin can't escape the life characteristics of this race. Your existence is an impact on the fragile balance of the entire 9 realms. Although there is a fierce conflict between you and me, I don't want you to stand on the opposite side of the 9 realms. Odin took a deep breath, barely calmed down the decline of his body, cheered up and said in a deep voice. Martin suddenly smiled. Odin, as far as I know, compromise, but you have never made it. I didn't compromise with you, but for Asgard and the 9 realms, compromise with you. Odin's body was taut, and his face was cold, mixed with a determination to completely abandon everything. Such a terrifying human being is still hostile to Asgard, and his son Thor is still on Earth. Once he is killed here, this human being may not be able to kill Thor and the whole Asgard. Asgard's background is beyond your imagination, human beings. There are some things, even my god king must be cautious in his peak period, and only Asgard, can suppress those things. Odin looked coldly. Martin looked calm. At this time, a voice filled with powerful magic came. Martin, this battle ends here. Ancient One stepped out of the earth in 1 step, and accompanied by bright sparks, Ancient One walked out of the portal and stood in front of Martin. This is the first time Martin has been with this astonishingly hard backstage, and the inhumane Earth Asgardian. Ancient One intervened strongly, and this battle was temporarily brought to an end. Odin suffered a terrible defeat. In his twilight years, he lost to a mortal on Earth. The King of God, together with the entire Asgard, swept the ground with majesty. Martin looked at Ancient One. This was the first time he saw this Asgardian. He felt the huge magical power of the other party. He was thoughtful and jealous. If possible, he would rather be an enemy of the whole world tree. He didn't want to tear his face with Ancient One. Odin is really worthless. There are as many Odins as there are universes. Looking at the infinite multi-universe, the total amount of Odin is endless. Odin that killed this universe, and there are many Odins in other universes. But Ancient One is different. Her backstage is too strong, one of the ultimate magical sources of the Marvel system, the Emperor Weixin of the multi-level universe. Martin was silent for a moment, pointed at Odin, and said faintly, "This guy's body almost collapses. If I insist on shooting, the price is that the entire galaxy will be destroyed, right? Yes, even me, it is difficult to shelter the Earth, there are your subordinates on it." There was a smile on Ancient One's face. Odin leaned on the gun of eternity, took a deep breath, and said solemnly, "You have won, Martin. You are the second existence in history to defeat the King Odin. Your name will eventually resound throughout the universe. As defeated for the price, I have to give up the idea of holding you accountable, and I have to put aside the dignity of the king, hoping to get your consent. Thor can't die, he has a bigger mission to complete." "The eternal fire," Martin said suddenly. "What? This is the price of your defeat. I need the eternal fire," Martin said calmly. At this moment, even Ancient One turned his head to look at him in surprise. Odin frowned deeply and clenched the eternal spear. "The eternal fire is Surta's fire of life. It is eternal and extremely harmful. Why do you want this kind of thing? You don't need to know what I want to do. Either give me the eternal fire, or I will find a way to kill you now. Even if I can't kill you, I will destroy Asgard." Odin fell into silence. After a while, he slowly raised his head. In silence, he raised his hand. On the huge amounts of Asgard, a streamer flew up and quickly fell onto Odin's palm through Bifrost. "I hope you can make good use of him. In order to kill Surta, the entire 9 realms were almost destroyed." Odin said in a cold voice, forcibly suppressing the worsening physical condition, trying to pretend that everything is normal, turned and left, and went straight back to Asgard. When stepping on the ground of Asgard, the powerful earth veins surged and were absorbed by Odin madly, but even so, Odin couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood, and the whole person's face instantly became extremely pale, and the whole person was powerless. The ground slumped to the ground, gasping for breath. In the battle with Martin, the load on him was too great, and the battle was too difficult. After all, it's still too old. Odin stared at the sky with one eye, and fell into silence for a long time. The majesty and sharpness of that suit also reduced at the moment slightly, and his life began to count down. He will die soon, but I don't know how long he will last. The vacuum of the universe. Only Ancient One and Martin are left. Ancient One, you already knew if this battle between me and Odin was right. Martin lowered his head and looked at the eternal fire, which was vital to him, and asked without raising his head. In general, I saw fragmentary pictures, and this is just a possibility in countless timelines, but I didn't expect you to actually defeat the King Odin head-on. Ancient One put on his hood again. You are very special, Martin, the one that has caused the most dramatic changes in the future I have ever seen. You can come to Kamar Taj when you have time, and then we will have a formal chat. The sparks lit up, and Ancient One disappeared in place. Martin raised his head and glanced, frowning, revealing deep suspicion and caution. His fear of Ancient One was much higher than that of Odin. Even in the comics of the previous life, Ancient One is a bottomless guy. After stepping down as the Supreme Magician, he can swim in the multi-universe. Only when Doctor Strange encounters major life choices and difficulties, the soul of Ancient One will come back and give Doctor Strange some tips. Ancient One. A guy with terrifying intelligence, strength, and backstage. Martin thought for a while, first recovered the damaged destroyer armor, and then directly driven the Supreme God armor to return to the Earth. The coordinates of the Earth had already been reflected in his mind. Relying on the power of the God armor, it was thousands of light years away. It's not worth mentioning at all. He returned. When passing the moon, the Black Bat King was looking at him from a distance. After looking at Martin, he nodded slightly, which was a moved roar. Martin Roar's whistle descended on the Earth. Accompanied by the horrible coercion, carrying the Sha Guang that tore off the myth with his own hands, he came to the Earth little by little like a living god. This time, he was once again seen by countless people on Earth. The reality that personally defeated the myth has caused the existence of the entire planet to fall into a long silence. The terrible combat power of destroying the stars at every turn has made many people even more so. The senior scalp is numb and fearful. Martin, like a real god. Enthroned. Dip. Congratulations to the host's name resounding throughout the galaxy, and a prestige draw is rewarded. A beep sounded in his mind, and a satisfied look appeared on Martin's face. In addition to the eternal fire, there are also unexpected surprises. I'm afraid that the next prestige draw will shake the single universe, and the next time it will shake the entire multi-universe. He is holding the eternal fire in his hand, and is overwhelming the entire Earth with his own power, and is respected and admired by countless people. At this moment, his identity has changed from a well-known executioner to a god slayer in most people's hearts. He expelled Odin, the king of God. The gods in mythology are real. How much information are they hiding from us? If it weren't for Martin, would our entire planet be destroyed by Odin? Compared with this, I am more concerned about whether Norse mythology is the only myth that exists. What about other myths around the world? Every myth system is real. The whole Earth is caught in huge amounts of turbulence, and the past few conflicts inside the Earth have already been covered up by the gods coming from the outside world at this moment. All kinds of conflicts on the Earth, to put it bluntly, can barely be regarded as internal disputes, but when the entire cosmic starry sky opens the door to the people on Earth, everyone will be shocked to discover that the little things they fought for in the past are really not worth mentioning. Martin lowered his head and glanced at the azure planet. Through the Supreme God armor, he instantly learned too much of the conversations of people on this planet. God armor's powerful information capture and collection capabilities allowed the Earth to be in front of him to a large extent. There are no secrets. Roar. He returned to Wakanda. Oh, it has now been renamed Earthbase. Countless shape-shifting King Kong with amazing postures gathered at this moment. The moment they saw Martin's return, they immediately bowed on one knee, showing deep awe and reverence. The cultivation warehouse has already started. Very good, I am very satisfied with the progress. Martin nodded, and then ordered Optimus Prime and Megatron some tasks. Optimus Prime opened his hand, and it was actually a large number of Mjolnir's fragments. He whispered, Thor is held in the base by us, and his broken hammer is here. Martin glanced at the Thor hammer whose power had been drained, shook his head, and said lightly, I know you like this hammer, but it doesn't matter, you deserve a better weapon. After speaking, Martin put away the fragments of Thor's hammer, quickly walked into his own room, and began to look closely at the eternal fire for the first time. This thing is the core life source of flame giant Surta. It is not an exaggeration to say that it is the heart of Surta, and it has the eternal and immortal attributes, which can resurrect the decedent. The characteristics of the eternal fire are somewhat similar to the function of the dark energy crystal. The dark energy crystal is the necessary energy to turn the shape-shifting diamond into a zombie diamond, and this. Martin stroked his chin. As we all know, shape-shifting King Kong also needs to eat. If you don't eat for a long time, the energy reserve in the body will become less and less, and the fire will become weaker and weaker. The food of shape-shifting diamonds is a kind of energy block called energy crystal. The energy in which can be easily absorbed by shape-shifting diamonds, and it seems to taste very good. In a short time, I can rely on my fire source to provide energy, but sooner or later, when they face independent Legion operations, I can't always be by their side. The development of my own energy crystal is imminent, and this eternal fire. For a moment, Martin fell silent. If ordinary energy crystals are normal food, there are some abnormal foods: red crystals and dark crystals. After eating the shape-shifting diamond of the red energy crystal, the energy gained is more abundant, but the price is that the thinking organs are disturbed, becoming violent, irritable, and bloodthirsty. The dark energy crystal is even more special. This thing comes directly from the Universe Emperor. The King Kong who eats the dark crystal will receive a full range of strength blessings and is qualified to control the zombie King Kong. In areas with dark crystal mines, there will be a large number of dead and resurrected shape-shifting zombies wandering around. After eating the shape-shifting zombies of dark crystals, you can control these zombies. In the original work, Megatron did this, not only once. It can be said that whoever can master the dark energy crystals is equivalent to mastering a terrible war core with battery life. If you think about it, you will know that after the death of those soldiers who charge, they can be immediately resurrected by the radiation of the dark crystals and thrown into the battlefield again, cyclically. The eternal fire is like a dark energy crystal. Martin intends to use the eternal fire to research a substitute for the dark energy crystal in advance. More importantly, he intends to forcibly swallow the eternal fire through the source of fire, and then obtain the ability of enslaving the terrifying Surta. In this way, he will have one more immortal level Godfather strong under his command. Let's start the prestige draw first. Martin pointed directly at the light curtain in front of him, staring at the image that flashed quickly above. Eventually, the screen stopped. It's actually him. There was surprise on Martin's face. What he needs most now is the shape-shifting King Kong who is good at scientific research. He didn't expect to draw a lottery directly.